Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. Oh my goodness, you all are the best. To everyone who has been listening and subscribing and rating and reviewing the show, man, I am deeply grateful. I had no idea that the response would be this positive and that it would be so rewarding to do this. So I want to say thank you before we go another step further. I don't take that lightly. I have been doing this work for a good long while, and it is really rewarding to hear how much it's touching you, how much it's affecting you, how much you're loving this. So I'm loving it too. That's pretty fun. And we're going to keep this going for a while. So I was thinking before today about today's topic. And the topic for today is envy. We're going to talk about using envy to your advantage, which is a pretty unconventional thought. And I was thinking back to when I first had a breakthrough in my thinking on this topic. And I think it was probably 8 to 10 years ago. And I had come across a piece in an Oprah magazine. It was like a really beautiful piece of creative writing, but she was talking about likening other women to like a garden of flowers. And the author was saying that up until she had this epiphany of her own, whenever she looked at other women, especially beautiful women, that she would feel this sense of not enoughness, that something about her wasn't living up to this standard of beauty that she was seeing around her. And so that was not helpful, right? It's not helpful for any of us. And she had this epiphany where she started thinking about how she appreciated a garden full of flowers and how she truly didn't spend any time comparing one flower to another, wondering, which one was the most beautiful. She just sort of took in the diversity and the various colors and sizes and shapes and thought, collectively it created this environment of beauty. And I don't know exactly what it was, but something about that moment clicked for me that, this was not a zero-sum game. We didn't have to create a forced ranking for every possible attribute in life. Beauty is certainly one of them that comes up a lot with women, but, professional success or financial success or relationship health. They didn't all have to be these fixed pies where if somebody was getting ahead, then I was getting behind, or if I was getting ahead, someone else was getting behind. And it was really this article. In fact, I was trying to go back and find the author of this piece when I was getting ready for today's podcast. And I haven't been able to put my hands on it yet, but if I find it, I'll drop a link to it in the show notes. So that was a breakthrough moment for me because it started to transform my connection with the emotion of envy into something radically different, something that was far more productive and that just left me feeling a whole lot better. So for today, what I'm going to do is talk about what you might think of as kind of an unpopular topic. But I want you to stay with me because we're going somewhere good with this. Envy, it's just not typically a welcome emotion. There are a few, right? Guilt is not a welcome emotion. Envy is certainly not one. Anger is not one for most of us. When it shows up, we kind of shut it down as quickly as possible because we have this belief that we're not supposed to be jealous. We're supposed to be grateful. We're supposed to stay in our own lane. And I believe all of those things. But I also believe that envy is normal. It's a normal human emotion. And when it surfaces, if we can hold on to it long enough to learn something from it before we lay it down, it can be like a big, bold arrow that we can follow toward our future. So let's talk about how. I want to talk today about how you can harness that emotion and turn it into something that's really powerful and productive for you in your own life. So the first point I want to make is, every battle with envy begins when we observe something that we admire. And so if we can transform envy at its inception into inspiration, then we're kind of halfway home. In other words, if we could see something that we admire and stay focused on that aspect of envy, really grounded in, humble admiration, then we wouldn't necessarily have to slide all the way into envy. Because what is envy? It's when we start comparing ourselves to that standard and feeling like we fall short. When we let the focus come back onto ourselves and we shine the spotlight on our own, perceived shortcomings versus that really inspiring standard that got our attention initially, then it gets twisted into something kind of ugly. But if we could just stay inspired by what we see instead of crossing over into jealousy, that's a pretty big shift. So what does that require? Well, it requires staying focused on them, not us. And when we do this really well, we do this really well when we are admiring someone who has talent or success in an arena that we don't really care very much about. I never envy like a 6'5" basketball star. But I'll bet there are an awful lot of 5'10", 17-year-old boys who do. Because it's so much trickier for us when we are on the same path as that person that we admire and we feel like they're starting to pull ahead of us, especially if we know them well. It's also a little easier to stay focused on them when it feels like there's so many steps ahead of us that we don't even have that expectation of ourselves yet. But if they're just a little bit ahead and they're on that same path and we are working to get there and we're not there yet, that's where the pain starts to come in. And how does it show up? Well, we start, instead of focusing on them and this aura of admiration, we turn it inward and we start focusing on how far behind we feel, how much we're falling short, how we're never going to catch up. So what I think is important about this first point of kind of managing envy is challenging yourself to stay in the space of admiration for longer. And we're going to talk in a minute about what do you do with what do you do when you finally turn your focus back to yourself? But challenge yourself to stay in that moment of admiration longer. In fact, I'm going to take it a step further and suggest that maybe we go looking for it. Maybe we go looking for places where we can sit in admiration and then even express it. Because think about who you could lift up today with, a word of heartfelt praise or some note of appreciation. Maybe it's that woman in the line at Starbucks with the great haircut and you're standing there looking at her feeling like you really need a haircut or highlights or whatever. But maybe just giving her the compliment is an important first step. Maybe it's the colleague who just killed it on that last project. And you can write a note or speak a word of encouragement to that person. Maybe it's the Facebook friend who just has the most creative kids' craft projects that you've ever seen. And maybe instead of simmering inside about how you never do this and you don't have time and if only, right, blah, 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 if you instead just put a comment on one of their posts about how awesome they are. That is a redirection of energy, right? You're redirecting your energy toward making someone else's day instead of ruining your own. Same emotion, same gap, same spirit of admiration, but the energy all goes towards something positive, right? Making someone else's day instead of that inward focus of ruining your own.
Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
Okay, now let's say you get your arms around this and you start to practice this idea of expressing admiration, and you really notice that there are so many places to admire excellence in the world. Sometimes you're still going to feel that tug back inward about how you're not there yet. Someone else ahead of you, you're not there yet, you don't know why. So here, the second point I want to make is that is when you want to challenge yourself to figure out why it matters to you. Whatever it is that she has, why do you want it? It could be the beautiful house. It could be the handsome husband. Maybe she got a big promotion. Maybe she has a thriving business or a great relationship with her mother. Why do you care? And importantly, I am not suggesting that you shouldn't care. I'm just asking, what does it mean to you? Right? Because if you have envy over something, it means you want it. It's a clue as to a direction that you want to take your life. But if you misjudge it as being about that exact thing instead of what that thing represents, then you could end up on a journey that is not your own. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say you have a sister-in-law who is an attorney and she's worked really hard and she makes partner. And you are feeling really jealous of the fact that she makes partner, but you have not gone to law school and you are not an attorney. Does it make any sense for you to experience envy over this if you don't even have any desire to be a lawyer? Not really. Because probably what's underneath that is there's something that it represents to you that you really do want. It could be the money, it could be the prestige, it could be the office that it comes with, it could be, the city she gets to live in. I don't know, right? Whatever the thing is for you around the aura of that success that she's attained, if you can get really clear about why you would want that, what does it represent to you? What would it open up for you? Then you might find that there is way more than one way to get that why fulfilled. Right? You don't have to go make partner at a big law firm to have some of what comes along with that. There's many paths to that outcome. But knowing what it represents, that can really help you find the range of ways that you could get the desired emotion or that feeling that you've associated with it for yourself. Almost every time what you'll find when you're really kind of struggling with envy is that you're chasing the why behind it and not the specific attribute. And teasing them apart is freeing because you can find your own path to that outcome. But it is a clue. When you feel that envy, it is a clue that this is something that's probably on your life's path, something that you do desire and that you haven't quite attained yet. And there's nothing wrong with paying attention to that and lining up your actions behind it. Okay? Which brings me to my third point. The third point, after you've sort of reframed it as admiration, right, and you have figured out why it matters to you, the third point is, what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? What are you doing to get there? And if the answer is nothing, you got to pay attention to that. If you want, say, that big promotion and your colleague got it and you didn't, what are you doing to get it? The honest assessment of what are you doing? Maybe you want to lose 20 pounds and your friend decided to do something about it and she's been working out and she's gotten on an eating program and she lost 20 pounds and you're just beside yourself with envy. What are you doing? Are you still eating the way you've always eaten? Are you exercising? Are you kind of saying you're exercising, but not really? Because sometimes that the yuck that we feel in envy is really a little bit of shame over not taking action in this direction that we know we want to go. So when our actions don't line up with our deepest desires, right? When we have something we really want and we look at our life and say, I am not taking action in that direction, sometimes we misjudge it as envy, but it's really this disappointment in ourselves that we're not doing anything about it. Maybe it's somebody who has a great sense of style and you just never have felt like you dress very well and you never look put together. Well, are you reading magazines about what's in style? Are you in the stores looking at what's displayed to really pay attention to and try to mimic that? Are you trying new things, or are you just wearing the same stuff you've always worn? Are you working with a stylist, somebody who can give you professional guidance in an area so you can build your own expertise? I mean, we could go on all day with different vectors of how this plays out. You have to be two things. You have to be able to affect this outcome and willing to do the work to get there. Because yes, some things are beyond our control, right? Like your height. I mentioned the basketball reference earlier. I'm not going to become a 6'2" basketball player. I can become a 5'5" basketball player, maybe not a very good one, but I'm not going to become 6'2". That I have no control over that. I have no control over the behavior of family members. I can control my behavior, but not the behavior of family members. So there are some things that we may feel envy about and wish we'd been blessed with, like, I don't know, a great singing voice maybe, but they are beyond our control. But if we can influence the outcome and we're not doing anything about it, then we suffer twice. The flip side, the positive side of this is when we're taking action consistently toward what we want, honestly, even if we're not quite there yet, we feel so much better. The power of that agency behavior of ownership is really transformative because we can look at ourselves and say, yeah, I'm not happy with where I am right now, but I am on a path to where I want to be. And I am investing the one thing that I have, my time, my energy, in pushing me in that direction. And I will tell you that almost everything you want, with the exception of those uncontrollable factors, is on the other side of consistent action with intention, right? With an intention of moving your life in the direction that you want most. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in future episodes of this podcast, about how to line up those actions so that your time really is spent in the direction of the things that you want most, because it matters that much, right? It'll change your whole life. So envy is not the enemy. Even though it's not normally a welcome emotion, and typically when it shows up, we shut it down, envy is a clue. It reveals something about the direction that we need to move. And if we can hold on to it just long enough to learn something from it, then we can really get somewhere good. Okay, so the next time that you're maybe feeling bothered by that emotion, it shows up at the most inopportune times, and you're starting to feel yourself spiral downward, there's three things to remember, right? First, reframe it as admiration. It's kind of instantly helpful when you can get the focus off of yourself and onto someone else, and you watch the power that you have to lift them up, to make their day. Put that energy out into the world. Reframe it as admiration. The second piece is figure out what it represents to you and focus on that why, the why it matters. What does this thing that you're feeling envy about represent to you? What does it mean? What do you think it would feel like if you had it? Focus on that and then start asking yourself, what are all the ways that I could deliver on that actual thing that I want, that sense of belonging, the sense of health and vibrancy, the sense of professional success or financial success. Focus on that and then all the paths available to you to get there. And third, get really clear and honest with yourself about what you are willing and able to do about it. And you have to be both. There has to be room for you to maneuver, something you tactically can do to get there, and then you've got to be willing to do it. Because a lot of this stuff, consistent effort, but sometimes hard work, and sometimes we want the prize without the effort. So really getting honest with yourself. It is also okay to say, yeah, I might want that outcome, but I'm not willing to do the work. Then you can lay down the envy and say, it's not very productive to feel this sense of loss for something that, I'm just not really willing to do. So it is clearly not about that other person at that point, right? It's about our own willingness to take action. So today, we really talked about choices. We talked about having some agency over your life and the outcomes that you would enjoy as a result of that. But in the next episode, we're going to get into that even more deeply, right? And we're going to talk about one of my least favorite phrases on the planet and why you absolutely must stop saying it if you want to feel like you have it all. Okay, so that's going to be a good one. We're going to debunk this phrase and give you another way of behaving in the world that's going to be a whole lot more productive in getting you where you want to go. So if you enjoyed today's episode, and if you have about 30 more seconds, I would love it if you would take a minute to rate this show and also share it with someone who you think will love it. We are really in a phase here of getting the word out, of getting this into the hands of people who can benefit from a little bit of time spent thinking about some of these concepts, particularly working women who want to feel like they have it all. And, we're on this path together of sorting through the pieces to get the outcome that we want and to feel the way we want to feel. So if you have a second and you can think of some people who might benefit from the show, forward it on to them, share it with them, and then take a second to rate it when you can. Cool? Now go be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.